Right before the second season of House of the Dragon premiered, George Martin shared an interesting blog post about how some screenwriters and producers approach adapting great stories. Everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. It doesn't seem to matter whether the source material was written by Stan Lee, Charles Dickens, or Tolkien. No matter how major a writer it is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do better, eager to take the story and improve on it. The book is the book, the film is the film, they will tell you, as if they were saying something profound. They never make it better, though. 999 times out of 1,000, they make it worse. And as one might expect, this blog post sparked quite a bit of controversy. While some fans speculated that Martin might have been subtly criticizing the House of the Dragon writers, others argued that the first season was so well done that Martin wouldn't possibly be criticizing them. However, here we are, and after Season 2, Episode 6, I believe this blog post is indeed a shade towards the show's writers. In fact, Martin's recent blog post about dragons further proves that there are aspects of the show that he found quite problematic. In that blog post, Martin briefly wrote this: "My dragons are predators. They can hunt their own prey, but they are also territorial. You won't find dragons hunting the Riverlands or the Reach or the Vale. Fantasy needs to be grounded. If you ignore canon, the world you have created comes apart like tissue paper." This post, much like the first one, becomes even more meaningful with Episode 6. Because in that episode, Rhaena spots a riderless dragon hunting down in the Vale, which directly contradicts Martin's description of how his dragons should behave. I mean, as a writer myself, I'm not against deviations from source materials. Because we can all agree that adaptations often need to make changes for a lot of reasons: pacing, visual storytelling, or simply the practical constraints of television production. These are all normal things. But when these changes start to conflict with core elements of the world building or the characters, the story can quickly become chaotic. And like it or not, it can leave a sour taste in your mouth, much like the later seasons of Game of Thrones did. In fact, like any adaptation, House of the Dragon has already made several changes to plots and characters, some for the better, some for the worse. However, just as Martin hinted at his discontent, fans have also expressed their disappointment with certain choices, particularly in the second season. And one such scene was the kiss between Rhaenyra and Mysaria. Personally, I wouldn't mind if Rhaenyra were portrayed as queer, as long as it serves a compelling narrative about a queer woman fighting for her righteousness. But that scene doesn't fit that description. I think it's quite problematic for several reasons, including its deviation from the source material and poor execution. So I can totally see why that scene ended up being almost like a scapegoat for the fans who are unhappy with the second season. First of all, the scene feels completely out of nowhere. It, of course, never happened in the book, and even within the show itself, there was no build-up or hint of sexual tension leading up to it. The thing is, the scene was improvised by the actors during filming based on a suggestion from Emma Darcy, who plays Rhaenyra. This further proves that there was no prior build-up for the scene. Before Emma's idea came into play, the scene was like a tender moment between two women who had both faced their own struggles. It was a beautiful opportunity to show a deep bond forming, especially considering Rhaenyra's loneliness and lack of respect from others. I mean, it could have been a powerful way to highlight her need for support, but instead the scene suddenly became sexualized. And when you think about the context of the conversation, it becomes even more weird and out of place. According to Sonoya Mizuno, who plays Mysaria, the improvisation was done simply because it felt like the right thing to do, rather than serving any specific narrative purpose. And actually, this isn't the first time the show added such a jarring scene. Remember that scene in the first season when Rhaenys made her entrance into the dragon pit on her dragon Melis? The writer of that episode, Sarah Hess, admitted that she wrote that scene just to make it look cool. What I mean is that these moments, added without clear narrative purpose, point to a bigger problem with the show's storytelling: a lack of understanding of one of its key rules, Chekhov's gun. This principle means that if you introduce something in a story, it should serve a purpose, whether it's advancing the plot, adding to the conflict, or connecting to the overall narrative. For example, if you mention a rifle hanging on the wall in the first part of your story, that rifle should definitely be used in the second or third part. If it's not going to be used, there's no need to mention it. And for me, it's surprising to see even the writers of such a major production seemingly ignore this principle. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mean that the show is terrible. It has its strengths too. Great acting, well-crafted characters like Aegon, and some smart narrative choices. But overall, I think the writing is all over the place. There are unnecessary additions or removals, inconsistent characterizations, and repetitive plot points. For example, Daemon's storyline in Harrenhal. Again, I can totally understand the frustration with it. It's frustrating because it feels like the show is spinning its wheels. I mean, we get it, he's confronting his inner demons, but the writers seem to be overemphasizing something we've already grasped a few episodes ago. Instead of lingering on Daemon, the show could have explored Jace's story in the North or focused on all those underdeveloped side characters, especially those in the Black Council. Because for now, they feel bland and one-dimensional, as if they exist solely to interact with the main characters. I have to admit, though, we can only criticize these problems to a certain extent because ultimately, these are the writer's choices, many of which are blank points from the book. So no matter how ridiculous or jarring their decisions may seem, we can't prove them wrong. As viewers, we can only say whether we like them or not. But all that aside, what really bothers me is something George Martin himself hinted at. The deviations from the books, especially those undermine the lore and world building. Because for me, these aren't just innocent changes from the source material. In fact, they shake the very foundation of the world building. What I mean is, just think about Martin's blog post about dragons. If dragons were nomadic and anyone could claim them, they would have taken over half the world. Westeros wouldn't be the same. Every noble house would have dragons, and the whole power dynamic would be completely different. Just like a butterfly effect. Change one small detail, and the entire setting shifts. If you ignore that kind of buildup in a story, what you write just doesn't make sense. Or worse, you undermine your own lore. So what could be the reason behind all the issues with House of the Dragon? I mean, maybe, just maybe Miguel Sapochnik leaving might have something to do with it. Because he was one of the main producers and he really knew the world of Westeros inside and out. Unlike some other writers who admitted they haven't even watched Game of Thrones, Sapochnik was there from the beginning, directing some of the best episodes. Maybe his departure left a creative hole they couldn't fill. And interestingly enough, just before the season 2 premiere, Matt Smith and Olivia Cook hinted that Sapochnik's absence will be noticeable. So when you put it all together, it becomes clear why the second season of the show didn't sit well with a lot of people. And honestly, you don't even need to keep up with all of Martin's blog posts, actor's take, or writer's room drama to see that the show has problems, especially with the writing. But knowing what's going on behind the scenes can definitely help explain why some things aren't working as well. And that's actually why I make this video. To address the elephant in the room and answer the questions or concerns that viewers who find the show quite problematic. Because at the end of the day, for those of us who are truly invested in Martin's world, the direction of the story doesn't look promising. When you consider those examples like the Rings of Power or Star Wars franchise, it's not unreasonable to worry about what House of the Dragon could become. I hope this video ages like milk. And again, just as Martin himself said, no matter how great the stories are, there are always writers who think they can improve on them. But maybe what's needed is to be faithful to the source material. Because if you ignore the canon, the story might just fall apart like tissue paper. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a comment, give a like, and click to subscribe. Your support will greatly help the mysterious algorithm notices me. And if you want to support me personally, you can join the channel by using the join button. See you next time.